All right, welcome back to ABA exam review and the start of our fifth BCBA practice exam question series, where we go through a full BCBA practice exam together and break the questions down. If you're new to the channel, welcome. If you're returning, welcome back. Please like and subscribe. Check out behavioranalyststudy.com for our practice exams, combo pack, study guide, and our practice question bank. As always, when you pass, let us know so we can include you in our Sunday shout out. Work hard, study hard. Let's get going. Number one, Alex eats oatmeal every morning. He adds water, heats up the oatmeal, and then finishes by adding peanut butter. In order to perfect his oatmeal, he uses a different amount of water each morning and records how satisfied he was with his oatmeal. What assumption does this most resemble? All right, we're talking about our philosophical assumptions. Okay, not to be confused with the dimensions of ABA. It's a common mistake. So let's think about our assumptions and think about what Alex is doing. He's eating oatmeal. He's adding water, heats up the oatmeal, finishes by adding peanut butter. He wants to perfect his oatmeal, so he uses a different amount of water each morning and records how satisfied he was with his oatmeal. What is Alex doing? Well, he's manipulating a variable, and the variable he is manipulating is the water. He then records, well, how satisfied was he, right? Satisfaction is the DV in this case. Okay, it tastes better, it makes him more full. Whatever the case may be, he's more satisfied. So what assumption does this most resemble? A, parsimony. Parsimony is saying we're using the simplest explanation first. Well, Alex isn't really offering up the simplest explanation. He's going through the process of manipulating variables. And when you're manipulating variables to possibly find functional relations and just see how things change, what you're doing is experimentation. So B looks pretty good, but we always read all of our answer choices. So C, replication. Well, nobody's replicated this yet, right? Alex is not replicating. He's manipulating the variables. If Alex finishes up this experiment and his wife comes in and says, well, she wants to do the same thing, that's replication. And then D, philosophical doubt. So if Alex finishes his experiment and his wife comes in and says, well, I don't think your findings were right, or I doubt that's the correct amount of water, that's philosophical doubt. So you have to understand, okay, kind of the process and the sequence of these things, all right? He's not offering up the simplest explanation. He's going through and manipulating variables through experimentation. Replication would be if his wife came in and did this whole process over again. And philosophical doubt will be if his wife came in and said, well, I question the findings. I question if your amount of water is the correct amount of water. 2, Ted Lasso is watching his soccer team warm up before a big match against their rivals. Ted watches as his players kick the ball around, turns to Coach Beard and says, we're going to lose today. What level of understanding is this? All right, levels of scientific understanding: description, prediction, control. Description is the lowest level of understanding. We're simply looking at a variable, describing what we're seeing. Prediction, we are looking at two variables and predicting their correlation, predicting what might happen if we manipulate them. Okay, we're starting to identify correlations. And then control, we're actually going through the process, the experimentation process of manipulating variables to identify functional relations. Well, Ted Lasso, he watches his players kick the ball, okay, which is, let's say, variable one. And then he says, well, we're going to lose today. So Ted is saying there's a correlation between his players, how they're kicking the ball around, and losing. He's not describing how they're kicking the ball around. He's saying there's a chance that the way his players are kicking the ball is correlated with losing. So he's predicting they're going to lose based on watching his players kick the ball around. Now, he's not manipulating anything. He's not establishing a functional relationship. So it is not control. 3, a behavior analyst conducts a task analysis and establishes a 10-step chain that they will use to teach their client to make their bed. Each step is critical to making the bed. After learning 5 steps and needing assistance with the other 5 steps, the behavior analyst decides they will implement a behavior chain interruption strategy. How should they proceed? All right, long question. So let's slow down. We always want to do all our work in the question first. Don't jump to the answer choices and start guessing and predicting and trying to figure out without understanding the question. We've got to understand the question first every single time. So how should they proceed? How should the behavior analyst proceed? We know they want to implement a behavior chain interruption strategy, meaning they're going to interrupt this chain at some point. Now, do you notice anything wrong with that strategy at the time? Well, what I notice, right, is that after learning 5 steps, the client still needs assistance with the other 5 steps. Should we implement a behavior chain interruption strategy if the client can't do all of the necessary steps independently? That's the question you must ask yourself. So, how should they proceed? A, place the pillows in a different spot than they usually are. Again, the question we need to answer is, should we even do this interruption strategy? And the answer is no, right? If the client or the learner cannot engage in all of the steps and all of the critical steps, right? Each step is critical, okay? Each step is critical. If they can't engage in all of the critical steps independently, you should not yet use an interruption strategy because they already need assistance with 5 other steps. You can't just start disrupting the chain when it's not even learned yet, right? The chain needs to be learned first before we start disrupting it. So placing the pillows in a different spot, putting unfamiliar sheets on the bed, taking the sheets completely off the bed are all options later on. But right now, what the behavior analyst needs to focus on is continuing teaching the chain until that level of independence is achieved. Then they can go through these other steps of interruption. 4, Matthew gets extremely anxious and goes through significant bouts of reactivity whenever you observe him reading out loud. Sometimes he is unable to read out loud at all. You still would like to get a measurement of this behavior. What would be the best way to do this out of the following options? Now, this is tricky. And why is this tricky? Okay. And when you're reading this, yeah, we're using words like anxious and it's not really what the question is asking about. Okay. A lot of people, since, we're so programmed to think about public observable events, okay, they see anxious and they start immediately trying to write off this question. It's not really even what the question is asking about. So avoid that common mistake. Okay. The question is you want to measure the behavior. And what is the behavior? Well, the behavior is reading out loud. So that's what we're really worried about. What the real problem is, okay, it's not the use of anxious. What the real problem is the reactivity. So if he is reactive whenever you observe him reading out loud, then you are changing his behavior just by being there. Okay. We need to eliminate that. And the best way to do that, right, is to remove yourself from the situation. But that's difficult because he's reading out loud. So what can we do? A, take duration data on Matthew reading out loud to his class. Well, duration data is going to be a direct observation. It's not really going to help with your reactivity problem. B, record permanent product data on reading out loud. Is reading out loud going to create a permanent product? Not in that form. Once I read out loud, I'm reading out loud right now, right? And it's just gone, okay? But how am I capturing myself reading out loud? Well, C, I'm contriving permanent product data using a recording device. So it is possible to contrive permanent product data. So even D, using whole info data, you still need to directly observe him. So A and D don't solve our issue with reactivity. B is not realistic because reading out loud is not going to just create permanent product. What you have to do is C. You need to contrive this permanent product collection using a recording device. So Matthew is reading and somebody has their phone out recording or just anything, right? And you don't have to be there to hear Matthew reading out loud. Then you can use that permanent product as measurement. Okay, so it's a little workaround sometimes when the behavior doesn't necessarily produce permanent product, but you really want permanent product. Okay, you can contrive those situations. 5, usually Jacob's wife does not care that he puts his feet on the coffee table whenever he is watching television. However, when Jacob's mom is at the house, Jacob's wife will always tell Jacob to put his feet down. What can we say about Jacob's wife telling Jacob to put his feet down? Behavior question, and they're specifying what we're looking at. We're looking at Jacob's wife telling Jacob to put his feet down. We know his wife doesn't care. Okay, she doesn't care that he puts his feet on the coffee table. But when Jacob's mom is there, all of a sudden she starts telling Jacob to put his feet down. So why has Jacob's wife behavior suddenly changed? Well, the mom, right? That's the only thing that we can point to as a change agent of Jacob's wife's behavior. So what are we going to say about that wife or the wife's changing behavior? A, it is reinforced by Jacob's mom's presence. Well, we don't know that, right? It could be reinforced by Jacob moving his feet. It could be reinforced by escaping Jacob's mom's presence. We're not sure why it's maintained. We're wondering, why is it changing? Well, B, it is likely under stimulus control of Jacob's mom. That is a realistic and a parsimonious explanation. She doesn't care. She never says anything. All of a sudden, Jacob's mom shows up her behavior changes. Stimulus control is behavior changing in the presence of a stimulus, essentially, right? So as soon as Jacob's mom gets there, now she's like, well, Jacob, put your feet down. Her behavior appears to be under stimulus control of Jacob's mom. See, Jacob's wife is more annoyed in the presence of Jacob's mom, which causes her to tell Jacob to put his feet down. The issue here is we are saying annoyance is causing Jacob, or it's causing the behavior change. And we never attribute a hypothetical construct, okay, to as the cause, right? That's an explanatory fiction. Annoyance is internal, okay? It's we acknowledge that it exists, but we're never going to say it's the cause of the behavior. Jacob's wife might be annoyed, but the cause or the reason her behavior changed is because Jacob's mom is now present. D, we cannot draw any conclusions. Well, we can draw a parsimonious one, which is it's likely that Jacob or Jacob's wife's behavior is under the stimulus control of Jacob's mom, considering her behavior changes when Jacob's mom is present. 6, a group of technicians are discussing a shaping procedure to use with your client. The technicians tell you that they don't think prompts should be used during shaping. How should you respond? Okay, this is going to be your life as a behavior analyst. You're going to be answering questions like this constantly. You're going to be settling arguments and discussions and debates with your technicians. So you just have to be prepared, right? And nothing is ever a stupid question. Everything is relevant, okay? You should be happy technicians are discussing cases, right? So anyway, a group of technicians are discussing a shaping procedure. They say they don't think prompts should be used during shaping. How do you respond? Well, do you think prompts should be used during shaping? Sure. Why not? Right? Why can't we use prompts during shaping? So A, agree with them. Prompts should not be used during shaping. If prompts are used, it is no longer considered shaping. Well, that's just not true. Okay, prompts are totally fine during shaping. B and C, tell them it depends. It's okay to use physical prompts, but not modeling prompts, or it's okay to use modeling prompts, but not physical prompts. Well, in Cooper, they actually point to both physical and modeling prompts as two totally acceptable prompts to use during shaping. What they say is that if you're going to use prompting during shaping, you have to fade them immediately. So if you're going to use prompts during shaping, the same rules apply as other prompting. There's nothing wrong with them, but we have to fade them because we don't want the behaviors under the stimulus control of the prompts. We want the behavior under the stimulus control of the SDs. So it is okay to use prompting during shaping, but you have to fade those prompts. 7, of the following, a multiple baseline is least likely to be used to evaluate what? Easy question. And there are easy questions on the exam. You will get easy questions, okay? We don't know what questions are going to be easy or going to be hard. It doesn't work like that, right? But not every question is going to be a really hard question. The mistake people make is they get an easy one like this and they overthink it. They think there's a trick or they're trying to confuse you. They're not trying to trick you. They're not trying to confuse you. They want to test your knowledge. So let's answer it. Of the following, a multiple baseline is least likely to be used to evaluate what? Well, we know multiple baselines can be used across settings, and it is, and participants. Those are probably the two most common. You can also use them commonly across behaviors, okay? Settings, participants, and behaviors, 3 most common. Less likely, less common is multiple interventions. Now, you could contrive it in a way, maybe, where you could do multiple interventions in a very specific way if you combined it and did certain manipulations. But in general, a multiple baseline is least likely to be used to evaluate multiple interventions. That's it. That's how we answer easy questions. We trust our prep, answer it, and we move on. We don't overthink. 8, Jason is playing in the woods with his friends. He trips, falls, and cuts himself on a tree branch. He tells his friends he will be right back, and he runs back to his house to get a Band-Aid. He puts the Band-Aid on his cut. We can say for certain that this behavior is what function. So when we say this behavior, right, talking about putting the Band-Aid on his cut, okay? So putting the Band-Aid on his cut, what can we say for certain is the function of that behavior? Because if we look, right, he was playing in the woods with his friends. He trips, falls, cuts himself. He tells his friends, I'll be right back, and goes gets a Band-Aid. Now, he might get that Band-Aid to escape the blood. He might get that Band-Aid because he likes the attention he gets when he wears Band-Aids. He might just like the Band-Aids. He just wants to obtain the tangible. We don't have enough information to say that, but we know for certain that his behavior is what? Well, we know for certain his behavior is automatic. And why? Because by himself, he gets the Band-Aid, and he puts the Band-Aid on his cut. And he doesn't have anybody else doing it for him. This is a solo activity. It's an alone activity. He's doing it himself. When we talk about a singular person with no other party involved, we're talking about automatic behavior. Okay, so it could be escape, attention, or tangible. We don't know that. We do know for certain that the function of this behavior is at least partially automatic because he's doing it alone. 9, if you set your partial interval recording observation period at 20 minutes and your intervals at 1 minute, then partial interval recording would most likely overestimate what aspect of behavior? All right, trickier question. So let's think about it. We're using partial interval recording. So partial interval recording says the behavior has to occur at any time during our interval to count. We set our observation period, 20 minutes, and your intervals at 1 minute. You have 20 1-minute interval. How many total data points, okay, think about it, can you get? Let's say you get the max number of data points. Well, the max number of data points you can get, let's say responses, I should say, the max number of responses is going to be 20. Because in a partial interval recording system, you only count one response per interval. You have 20 intervals. The most responses you can record are 20. So if we're looking at this and we want to ask ourselves, what instance or what aspect of behavior would we overestimate? What is most likely? A, the frequency. Now, let's say in 1 minute, your interval, right? The behavior happens 10 times. Your data is going to indicate one response. So it's not going to overestimate frequency. B, duration. Well, we're not taking duration data on the behavior, so we're not getting duration data. C, the percentage of the observation period that the behavior occurred. Now think about this. Our observation period is 20 minutes. Let's say my behavior happened for 2 seconds in each interval. Well, the data is going to indicate that the behavior happened 20 times. It happened every single interval, and it's going to look like that behavior happened a lot. When in reality, if it only happened for 2 seconds per interval, it really only happened, 40 seconds? So it's really going to likely overestimate just how often that behavior is occurring. Because if that behavior occurs at all, it looks like it occurred throughout that 1 minute. So what's going to happen is the percentage of the observation period that the behavior occurred is likely going to be overestimated. Partial interval does not overestimate any aspect of behavior. Not true, because the percentage of the observation period that the behavior occurred is likely to be overestimated. Think about that logically, right? Think about your observation period, how long your intervals are, and how partial interval recording works. And then finally, 10, which of the following is not considered a variation of the multiple baseline design? There's a lot of different types of multiple baseline designs. Which of the following is not one? A, multiple probe. Well, multiple probe, you should know that's the most common variation of the multiple baseline design. A delayed multiple baseline design exists. Okay, if you picture a chart, you start your baseline in your first segment, and you wait to start your baseline in your second. So there's going to be less baseline data points in your second, third, and fourth, or however many segments you have. Non-concurrent multiple baseline design doesn't happen at the same time. That also exists. The one that is not considered a variation is going to be an alternating multiple baseline design. That's part of a multiple baseline design, right? So what is not considered a variation is C, an alternating multiple baseline design. You've got to know these other three. Great. Check out behavioranalyststudy.com for all of our study materials. Like, subscribe as we continue through practice exam 5. Every Friday, we have practice questions as well. And then Sundays, we're going through our task list series. So a lot of really, really good stuff. Make sure you subscribe to get all of that. Work hard, study hard. See you soon.